Hey guys, it's Kate and I hope you're having a fabulous day. I'm here with my vintage Derwent watercolor pencils and my Mei Liang watercolor palette, and I wanted to make this video for the watercolor with watercolor pencils either or you can also mix them in your artwork, and so I wanted to show you just a few things that might give you some ideas when you're doing your paintings. So I have here a couple of different ways we're going to do it, and then we're going to do a painting together. So first I'm going to go in this bottom corner and I'm going to show you a dry pencil that is activated. Now these are like maybe 40 years old and they still write like brand new, and I'm actually really pleased to use these today myself because I don't use these nearly as often as I would like. So I'm going to just make a few marks here, and I'm going to pick a couple of different colors so you can see some of the variations. So that first one that I did was deep vermilion, and this one that I just grabbed is indigo, and I'll do a couple of lines there. And then I'm going to grab, let's see, a nice yellow. So this one is deep cadmium, and I'm going to do a blend here. So I'm going to color in some of this deep cadmium, and then I'm going to get one of my greens, and I'm going to grab the olive green and just kind of put that right next to it, and I'm going to overlap that with that yellow, and then hopefully we will get a nice little gradient going. So I'm going to grab my flat brush and dip it in some water, and then we're going to activate these so you can see just how pigmented they are. And I didn't really color hard on this, but you can see the color coming up right away, and I even still have plenty on my brush that I can paint with. And then I'm also going to show you activating these lines. And so they just get so dark and pronounced on the paper. Now, once you activate the watercolor, at least for the most part in my experience, once it's activated and then it dries, it's kind of hard to get to activate again. Not impossible, but a challenge. And so you can see that indigo looks really nice, and it's just immediately blends together. Now this indigo has a lot more movement to it. You can kind of see it getting cloudy out there. Get this in focus. You can see how it spread a little bit on the page with that extra water. And then I am going to dip my brush and blot it again and activate the yellow first. And then I'm going to move it over into the green. And then I'm going to go back the other way, but I'm not going to go into my yellow. And so you get, oops, I didn't realize I was off camera. So you get that little bit of a gradient there. Another thing you can do is write into watercolor. So I'm going to put pick a dry pencil and put it in my wet watercolor up there. So I'm going to dip into my cobalt blue in my palette and just get some of that on my brush. And I'm going to put kind of a light little wash here. Let me get some more color. So I've got a good amount of water, and my paper isn't puddled, but it's got a pretty good sheen of color on it. So I'm going to take one of my dry pencils and I'm going to grab number 13, that is dark violet, and you can draw right in it, and the pencil will kind of activate right there in the moisture. And another thing you might notice is that it kind of does this little halo effect outside of the pencil. It almost pushes aside that color, and that pencil is activated with that moisture. Now, another thing you can do is dip your pencil in water. So this would be what the dry pencil looks like, just for comparison. I'm still with that dark violet. I'm going to give it a quick dip in my jar of water, and then I'm going to write with it, and I'm going to dip it again, and it will start to dry as it writes, but you can see that sort of partially activated color there, and it's much darker than the dry section on here. And I'm just going to note that so I don't forget. This is dry and that is wet. So you can see there's still some dry marks there, but on the areas where it's wet, it's much darker and richer in tone. And you can still go over that with a brush if you want to. And actually, let me do that a little bit here. So that is one that I wrote wet, but I can go over it with my brush. I also wanted to experiment what it might be like to do the dipped pencil and put it in wet watercolor. So I'm going to grab some of this Prussian blue and mix it with that other blue that I have. I think it was cobalt blue that I had, but I'm going to mix them together and get a darker blue here and get another little wash down on my page, just like this. And while that is still going, I'm going to grab the ivory black and dip that right into my jar of water. And I'm going to start writing with it. And this leaves a much darker, sort of clean line. And you can still see how kind of chalky that looks. And I think you can see the strength of the color a lot more. It almost starts looking like a line and wash. And again, you can see a little bit of that halo, and that's partly that sort of color bursting out from where the colored pencil is. So I'm going to let this dry to the side, and I'm going to grab another piece of paper and we can do a painting together. Okay, I'm back and I have my paper taped down, which is kind of funny because I used to not really tape my paper down and now I seem to be doing it. So I guess it helps to change things up now and then. I'm going to give my paper a quick little spray. And actually, since I've got yellow on this brush, I'm just going to brush this in so we can work wet in wet. And I'm going to start by painting a background sky. And I'm going to make it kind of like a twilight sunset type of deal. So I'm going to maybe have my horizon right about here, but I'm going to start by adding my yellow. And I'm going to keep this very bright and mop some back. I want it to be just a very bright area, and this is going to be the brightest part of my paper. Now I don't want that green sky, so I'm going to mix up a little bit of magenta here as kind of a transition color. I'm going to make it very watery, and I'm going to come in here and let that kind of blend in. So I'm going to come over here and blot my brush very well, kind of do a little bit of a dry brush, not a dry brush, but mop it up to the outside a bit, and then come in here and add some right down here to the bottom, just like that. And we're going to make this nice and just very light. Now I'm going to come into my blue that I have left over on my plate, or my palette rather, and I'm going to start mixing this in toward my sun. This is going to be a pretty abstract little sky we got going on here. And I'm doing a lot of mopping. I don't want it to be anything but a very soft blend. So I'm going to come over this again And just make sure I'm blending often. And having that sort of redness will help avoid a green sky. If you use that between your yellow and your blue. All right, I'm gonna just add some Payne's gray in here. My paper is starting to dry a bit at the bottom. And I'm gonna dip into my deep Hooker's green and maybe mix it a little bit with that yellow there. And we will have that. So we've got ourselves a nice bright sun. Now what I might do is come back into this Payne's gray, make it kind of a watery mix here, blot a little bit, and put in maybe some clouds here. Just like that. Just kind of drop them in where it seems interesting. Then I'm going to grab a little bit of my paper towel and just kind of add some fluff around it. I don't really want them to spread too much. I just want some interest in there. We're going to do a really simple sky, and I really like how these two colors blended down here. It's almost kind of spreading and giving some grass, which I really love. So I'm just going to leave this be and let it dry. All right, I am back and we are dry to the touch. So I'm going to use my watercolor pencils that are sliding down behind here to draw a flower. So my idea that I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a big flower as if it's right in front of us. And I'm going to draw one of the petals over this sun so it looks like the sun is shining through it. And that'll be a good way to kind of show you some different things you can do with watercolor pencil. So I'm going to do kind of a side profile of a flower. And I'm going to put maybe the base of it right about here. And I'm working with Madder Carmine, which is one of the pinkest colors I have. So I'm going to kind of sketch in the basic outline of my flower, just like this. And then I'm going to have another petal kind of coming out here to the side, and maybe even a little bit more, and then some flower ruffles here, and have that kind of scooping down that way. So I'm going to not put too much here, but I'm going to darken up my lines now for my outline. And I'm going to just come up and put in this color here. And I'm going to be coloring in some as well, but right now I just want to make sure I get my petal outlines just like that. So I'm going to come in here and start working in some darker colors, especially where these petals overlap. I'm going to pretend that that petal kind of comes down behind it right here, and we're going to have some shadows coming up this way, out this way, and out this way. And they're going to get a little bit lighter as we get up toward the top of the flower there. Now I'm going to move my pencil to its side and just add a very light hint of some color there, just like that. Now that's the Madder Carmine. I'm going to dip into next, well, not dip into, grab my Imperial Purple, and I'm going to add some more shading here to the bottom of this flower so we can get some different colors going on here and make it nice and brightly colored. So I have a very faded sort of light background, and that's going to make these watercolor pencils be sort of the star of the show here. And so I'm going to just make sure I get some of that darker color up through here and also up through there, and just get it differentiated a little bit. I'm even going to grab this dark violet and deepen it up a little bit more still. And the more I get toward the center of the flower here, the more sparing I'm going to be. I am going to add just a little bit more of this red here though, just like that. But I'm going to let that sunlight come shining through here. And I can always darken it, but it's hard to take away. So next up, I'm going to take number 28, which is cedar green, and I'm going to add my little bowl to my flower, just like this. And I'm going to have some of these little tendrils kind of come out because we're going to grab our flower, just like this. And I'm going to mix some up into the flower as well, and just have this kind of join together with our reds and purples, just like that. And I'm pressing pretty firmly on my colored pencil here. All right, I'm going to go into this Delft blue number 15 and add some nice shadow here. And I'm going to bring this stem down, just like this. And I'm going to bring in some of that blue here and make it nice and dark. And then I'm going to come up here with just a couple of leaves, just like that. And come back in with that blue. Okay, so this is a pretty basic sketched flower. I'm going to use my smaller round brush, and I'm going to start out with it pretty damp. So I'm going to use my paper towel right here to blot on before I actually activate my color here. Now in this area, so I don't want to cover up that sun too much, I'm going to go really easy right here to activate this color. And I'm going to start here first. And it's almost going to look like the sunshine is kind of coming through. I'm going to blot my brush again and just sort of drag this down a little bit and let that sun come through the petal. I dipped my brush again in water and blotted it on my paper towel again, and I'm just going to go over this a little bit more. So we definitely have that flower outline. And then I'm going to come in here to the deeper parts of my flower and start bringing those up, just like that. And I'm going to do the same thing to each of these other petals. I'm going to start outside to get that outline really activated. And then I'm going to start working my way into that darker color to get that going too. And I'm just sort of lightly scrubbing it with my watercolor brush. But I don't want to scrub so much that I'm activating the color underneath. So I'm just, again, taking the tip, going around this flower outline to get that nice solid line, and then I'm bringing it down into these darker values, particularly where these petals overlap. Just like this. All right. Now I'm going to work on this green. And I'm just doing a damp brush. It's not too wet. I'm not leaving a bunch of water on my paper. I'm just going over it enough to activate those watercolor pencils and darken them up nicely. And you can see that flower kind of coming to life with just a little bit of activation. And don't forget, these watercolor pencils are about 40 years old and they still activate like this. It's incredible. All right, I'm just carefully going over, making sure I have my nice hard dark lines, just like this. Now I can go in with my pencil again over the wet and strengthen some of these lines if I want to. I don't have to, but I can. And add in some more deeper color here, almost like a sketch. And the damp paper is going to pick up some of that pigment just right off of my pencil. And so I can kind of work on this a little bit and add some color here and there if I want. And then I can come back in with my brush again lightly and just give it a little bit more spread and activation, just like this. And I might do a little bit of dry brushing up into this petal, but I don't want to cover up that sun. That's going to be my sort of light shining through. Now I'm going to take this, I think it was, 15? So this is the Delft blue. I'm going to come back in here to the flower leaves and add in a little bit more darkness. And this is a very cool color because I'm going to imagine that this is more in shadow here behind the hill, I guess we can call it. And I'm going to do the same thing here. Just go over it very lightly with my brush to get that darkness activated. Now I could take my yellow. Let's say this part right here is still up around the sun. Maybe we add just a little bit of warmth to these upper leaves. We could do that. And just kind of let that mix in. And that'll give it even more of a glow. I think the only thing that I might like to do still is add a few little sprigs of grass. And I'm going to come in with that Payne's Gray. And I'm just going to come lightly through here. Just to add some texture and details. Just for some grasses kind of in the distance. And I'm just using the very sort of pointy tip of my brush. I don't want to add too much. Maybe we'll just do that. And just give a few little tufts of darker grass. Like that. And I think we've got ourselves a done painting. So let's get the tape up so you can see the finished project. And as you can see, it is a lot of fun. You have a lot of control when you do watercolor pencil in combination with watercolor itself. I mean, you have these wonderful soft background colors, but you can really get some nice hard lines and detailed edges and small details in your painting. And so if you use them together, you can have some really interesting effects. So I'm going to just make sure this is in focus. You can see the cloudy sky and the sunset, all that detail from the colored pencil and going over it twice. And then our shadowy flower stem and the grasses in the foreground. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Oh, by the way, I can't forget this. This is dry now, by the way. So here's our marks that we made, and you can see this and pause it if you need to, but this is what it looks like completely dry. So I hope you enjoyed this video and did enjoy doing this painting with me. Hopefully, if you have some watercolor pencils on hand, it's not too hard of a little project and it's a lot of fun. So I hope you liked this. Make sure to give it a thumbs up if you did. And if you want to see more videos like this, make sure to subscribe to my channel. And until next time, keep creating.